Hey everybody, welcome to our panel discussion with myself and Sonia. Um, we are today welcoming you to the Big Data IA Toronto um, panel on advertising and solving media and advertising challenges. In this day and age. So I'll introduce myself first. My name's Noel Geer. I'm the CEO and founder of Connected Interactive. I've been in the advertising industry for over 21 years, specifically in the startup space since 2007. Founded my second company, was very, very heavy into the mobile app marketing space for many years and got into programmatic about 6 years ago and have since then been diving very deep into data monetization, audience development, and how to effectively, build audiences for advertisers in a world of privacy and so on and so forth. Sonia, if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
For sure. It's Sonia Carreno, and I'm the president of IAB Canada, the Interactive Advertising Bureau of Canada. And we have over 250 members and represent the online advertising industry in the country. And that means we do a lot of advocacy work. We work with the government with upcoming regulations. So today we're going to be talking about privacy, and that's certainly a big ticket item. We also do a lot of education. We provide a lot of resources, and we generally just support the online advertising industry in general. I've also been in the industry for over 20 years, also in the startup space, more on the media side, as well as working with publishers and agencies, and then also brand strategy. So I'm very much looking forward to our chat this morning.
Me too. Lots to talk about, but we have to keep it short to 45 minutes. I'd like to kind of just go with a bit of a theme, and I think what we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna pose 3 questions, and then we're going to allow for a fourth from the audience. We want to make sure that what we cover today is applicable and it's something that you can use to take away from today and apply going forward with whatever it is that you're doing. If you're working for a brand, an agency, a media company, just in general, how to think about what's going to happen in the space and how we can help give you guys some insights on what we're seeing. We don't know it all, but we know enough that we can bring some value to you today. So that's our goal. So let's start with the first question. It might sound ambiguous, but there's a lot to be said about it. And generally speaking, there's a lot of questions right now about, where are we going? Google, I think there was some, back office cheers when they decided to extend the deprecation of the cookie. And Apple launching the iOS 14 updates this year. So, generally, what is the future of measurement and data capture with all the changes that are happening and the restrictions that we're seeing when it comes to anything from cookies to device IDs? I'll let you start. Yeah. I'll let you start.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that there's going to be a major impact on advertisers and on the entire supply chain. And I think that there's 3 sort of themes or 3 things that advertisers are going to need to consider, not only, in 2023 when we are going to start seeing this full blown, but they need to prepare for it now. Not because of the technical aspect so much, but because we also have legislation that is going to start cracking down on third-party data and the use of data. So I think the 3 different areas are that the first one is that advertisers are going to want to get a closer proxy to lower funnel activity. So they're going to want to get as close to the end transaction as possible so that they can get a better understanding of their return on ad spend. Which means that there's going to be a little bit of a shift towards the way that they think about, spending their dollars, their media dollars. And so hopefully that will not mean that that the entire industry will suddenly jump on performance models. I think that that's my one caution, is that they need to understand that branding and awareness is still so very important. So that's kind of the one caution, is don't rush too far into the lower funnel activity because you're scared. Remember that brand awareness is still going to be important. The second one is that I think that before we get into the complete diminishment of data or third-party data, is that there is going to be a lot of modeling that is going to take place. And I think that right now, advertisers need to get a better handle on what kind of first-party data they have, how they're going to be using it in the coming years, and also how to model out success metrics and frameworks before the day comes that we transition fully to a cookieless world. And then thirdly, I think that there's going to be a distortion of the full picture when it comes to measurement, as we start looking at the 3 different ways that advertisers are going to be able to spend on addressable audiences. And those 3 ways are, one is the identified audiences, so the using unique IDs. And we anticipate that that's going to be, or we're sort of estimating that that represents around 30% of the total online advertising audience. And then the second way is going to be through contextual signaling. And that means that there's going to be some machine learning and AI that's going to be involved. And we anticipate that that's, that, as well as the third way, Flocks, which is cohort advertising that is being kicked around right now in the Google Privacy Sandbox, will be sort of, those are going to be representative of almost 70% of the way that we're going to be looking at addressing audiences in the future. So those are kind of my 3 takeaways there, and I'm sure that you've also got like a really good insight on that, as well as some of the other factors.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk platform. Right now there's, there's been so much discussion around data being the most valuable resource in the world now, right? And data management platforms, getting pretty large valuations in the market. I think that the concept of a data management platform is going to change. I think CRMs are going to become a lot more of the picture. When we talk about analytics and modeling, and I totally agree with you. I think omnichannel, looking at omnichannel measurement and truly mapping out what's happening from an omnichannel perspective, because quite frankly, I see advertisers all the time get focused on that last click, and they really lose out on the value of the entire user journey, right? So omnichannel allows you to see that, and I think that that's going to become more and more important. Tracking things to a CRM, not necessarily just lower funnel, but actually beyond the conversion and the actual value of a customer, when you actually receive a customer and saying, okay, I acquired this customer, which is great. It cost me X to get this customer with all of the things that I'm doing, but what's the true value of that customer? It's not just the conversion, it's the lifetime value of that customer. So figuring out through, having a integration of, looking at things from an omnichannel perspective and measuring that out properly, and then tying that to an NCRM, which allows you to understand the lifetime of that value. It could be 3 years. I mean, the value in that customer could be so much longer. In some cases, it's a day. Some cases, it's 5 years. But understanding what that looks like, I think it's going to become a lot more important, as we move forward, and start, thinking about things differently. I think from a one-to-one, data perspective, consent is going to be king. If I was to predict what's going to be the most valuable resource in going forward in the future, I think it's consent. It's not data, it's consent. It's the ability to use that data in a number of different ways. And, we've seen value exchanges in the past. In the mobile gaming space, that entire industry was built off a value exchange. You know, you played a game, and if you wanted to watch a video, you'd get credits to continue to play that game or continue the gameplay. You've seen publishers coming out, online news sites coming out with a value exchange where, you know, there's engagement. So I think that there's going to be an opportunity for some exchange of value between the consumer. You're already seeing it. I don't think anybody's really done it right in terms of allowing people to monetize their data. I don't see that as a scalable model, but I do see giving people value, and actually exposing that and making that into some sort of exchange, and in return, them giving you permission to do certain things. You look at the update that's come from Apple, and God bless Apple, comes out with an update, doesn't tell anybody, and we've got like 2 weeks and everyone's basically scrambling and trying to figure it out after they launch this update, which they did tell ahead of time, but they didn't give anybody any idea exactly how it was going to go. And you get a message coming through your phone saying, do you give this app permission to track you, to improve advertising? That's not an exchange of value, right? That's really, as a user, I think we're seeing right now about 30% of users are giving that consent, which actually is high, given how that message is coming across. So I think there's going to be a lot of work done in terms of how that is displayed. Everybody talks about first party data, right? The value of your own first party data and what that's going to mean going forward. Do you see a lot happening in things like clean rooms, or platforms that could allow advertising partners to work together to share their data together? I mean, this is all coming down again. It's third party data. Is that second party data? How does that line up? I mean, if it's my data and I need to get permission from the user, what's the extent of that between third and second party data and the ability to use it?
There's a lot to unpack there, Noel.
Sorry, let's just focus on the last question.
Some of my favorite topics, wanting to consent and all that sort of stuff, which I think is going to be equally important. I think that to go back to first of all, I want to address what you were talking about with the CDPs. I think that first-party data is so very important to advertisers because it is so precious, and because of the fact that you're seeing, a sort of a plateau and a limited amount of consent that is going to be available to those advertisers. Because I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I just simply don't believe that marketers have really cracked the value proposition yet. Right. So I think what I'm seeing out there is, give me your email address and I'll give you 10% off this time. Those types of propositions, they're short-sighted, short-term, means nothing. I think, and I think that, with the, added mainstreaming of privacy being such an issue in the news and on Netflix, consumers are starting to think, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want you to have my data. And I think that I'll pay the extra 10%, which you're going to, so they're working it out. And so I think that, view that as a precious object, to your point, right? So, and the lifetime value of the customer and all that sort of stuff. And then once you have it into a customer data platform or a CRM system, I think the next step will be to organize that data and apply some sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning to start to understand clusters and to start creating your own sort of segmentation that you're then going to be able to organize to put into the supply chain, right? So identifying common traits, identifying common interests, really getting to understand your audience in a very, very new way, right? Not the old way. Not how many times did they visit your site, not how many times did they shop with a basket size list, but rather really get a better understanding of who it is that's interested in your product, and then using that data, leveraging it to go out into the supply chain and start advertising against it, so that you can sort of create your own unique lookalike modeling. To the other thing that you were starting to touch on, which was the working with second parties. and working with, almost like a collaborative sort of approach, I think that you are going to see a lot of clean room activity that's going on. I think that it's all going to be tied to the type of consent that you're able to get from the users, and I think that unique IDs and the consented audiences that you get from those unique IDs are going to be very helpful in that play, so that you can start to build private marketplaces and some transparency with the consumer to allow them to understand. We work with our partners to get a better understanding of what your preferences might be, and just sort of being clear about what you're going to do with the data. The fact is that we've started to see, and this from being in programmatic, really founding member of programmatic as well. Understanding that private marketplaces are becoming more and more essential.
Yeah.
Those private marketplaces, provide a really great opportunity for contained but shared data. It's almost like closed circuit data. And that on top of contextual signaling, I think is going to be really promising. And I think that there's going to be a lot of really great opportunities for people to use the data that they do have and then leverage it properly. It's just that my worry is that people aren't getting busy, like they're waiting out the runway.
Right.
Right. Because they think, well, I mean, it's not going to be that much work. And that's like a classic tech problem, where you're like, yeah, but that's not out until, privacy, PIPEDA is not going to be reformed until 2 years from now. Don't worry about it.
And move it to the next sprint.
But then you're stuck with nothing, right? GDPR came out, and, many publishers in the US decided not to or not to accept any European visitors in May of 2018 because they weren't prepared, right? They weren't looking at, what it means or what they need to build. And I fear that that we're kind of headed down the same path, where it's just like, let's just lobby, let's just complain about it. Let's complain about what Apple's doing. But that's not useful right now. What's useful is to understand what to do. You're in you can't panic later. You need to actually be calm and figure out what you're going to do with your data now and prepare.
Would you say that a lot of people are just waiting for Google to figure it out and come to them with the solution?
Well, I think that a lot of people invest a lot of money in Google, and I think that all eyes are on Google. I think that Google is doing some really important work right now, right? Because I think they understand that all eyes are on them, and I think that they understand, from a perspective, that we need to see the bigger picture. We need to have a bigger picture solution that's not just unique to Google, but rather to the supply chain. And that's why we're seeing them participate more and more with the tech lab, as we're talking about, how do we collaborate across the entire supply chain and not just make this a Google thing? How do we make it into something that is viable? And flocks, cohorts, are a viable solution, and they're kind of related to contextual signaling, right? So and they are helping to shape, and reimagine how advertisers will be able to interplay with the industry. And I think that, that's important work, and they're going to do it. They're going to be able to help.
Yeah, it is. It's very important work. I mean, but part of my question relates to, not being completely just dependent on Google. They are the one deprecating the cookie. But I've seen very often where advertisers are dependent on something like Google Analytics, which doesn't give you a full picture. It tells you, well, this is where the last click came from for that purchase, but gives you no insight as to what the path was to actually get there. And if you were to just take that information and that data and just start spending against where that last click occurred, you'd probably plummet in terms of your sales, right? So, ensuring that the work is being done as well, and in addition to, they've got a lot of work to do, and obviously that's why they extended it by 2 years. So even they're having trouble, actually fully getting this ready. We see companies like Lotame, for example, coming out with this with I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, but the unique identifier that they're coming out with. Obviously, the Adobes and all these guys are working on these unique identifiers. How do you see those aligning together in more of a collaborative type of scenario?
Yeah, so great question and really timely. We're just putting out an article today at IAB Canada because the Tech Lab has just this week released a standard for those unique IDs, right? Because we recognized a couple of years ago when we saw the writing on the wall that there was going to be, a race towards getting being the king of the unique ID.
Right.
Right. So everybody was going to have this, like, the super ID. Mine is going to win. Right. So eventually you end up with, the Lumascapes. Right. So now there's
No, not another loop escape.
just like, the IDs. Right. And some of them do have unique value propositions and everybody has their own secret sauce. However, the Tech Lab recognized very early that they needed to start building standards around this so that there was going to be, some transparency in the marketplace, some interoperability in the marketplace, right? So between Tech Lab and Prebid, there's a lot of work being done on how to make this stuff interoperable and how to have disclosures, appropriate disclosures of who's using what ID. And then, what that will do is it'll allow the industry, the advertisers, to be able to stitch together a much better picture, fuller picture, as opposed to having these fragmented, IDs being, whipped around the internet, right? Like, so I think that standardization is going to be key, and I think everybody understands that. There's never been a better time for people to sort of, sit there and go, standardization is actually a good thing, right? And I believe that that's really important, and that's, again, I go back to Google being involved in a lot of these discussions, right? Maybe not on the ID side, but just the bigger players coming to the table and contributing at least to the theories behind this stuff, to the code strings, right? Like that kind of stuff, really critical for the industry.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it'd be good to note this release that you guys are doing. Where can people go to get this information? Because I think that that's a really, really important piece.
Yeah, so it's out for public commentary right now until I think November, like sometime in November. We're putting out an article today, so I mean, you can always join the IAB Canada newsletter. That's a free for all.
Yep.
But you can also go to the IAB Tech Lab or just do a search on IAB Tech Lab, and you'll find your way to it. Really important work, and along with that, there's some of the other stuff that we've been talking about, you and I, this morning, on addressable audiences. Like, there's just been a lot of really great outputs right now because everybody is just trying to make sure that we're prepared, and that we've got the standards that we're going to need to have a seamless transition into a cookieless world, right?
Absolutely. I would encourage everybody to go to IAB Tech Labs and sign up for these newsletters and keep yourself informed on a regular basis, especially in a time like now. In order to keep yourself up to date on the things that are happening. This whole uniformity is so important in preparing yourself. Let's talk about some applications, right? So in addition to what's happening with cookie deprecation and Apple launching these updates, privacy laws obviously are adding scrutiny to everything, and GDPR, as you mentioned, and all that kind of stuff. What could be some applications for brands and agencies and advertisers to start future proofing themselves, to be ready, and maybe some additional things that people might not be thinking about now that could help prepare.
Well, I think that there's three things, and you touched on it earlier in the conversation, which is capital V, value. And if you can't crack value now, then you've got bigger problems than
Yeah.
right? So trying to understand that short term sort of propositions and the days of having just like you'll get a temporary discount or whatever it is, or share this with a friend and then you get it. No, you need to start really thinking long and hard about what value looks like in the long term, and especially for the younger cohorts, the Gen Zs, who are coming up the ranks right now with increasing wallet sizes. The next thing is going to be to once you've kind of cracked what value looks like, is that's not a set it and forget it situation anymore. Right. So I think that needs to have and this is where I think agencies have a really big opportunity, specifically the brand agencies, to sit down and really try to look at what does sustainable value look like. Right. So every year you're going to have to, it's it's a sustainable value strategy almost, that has everything to do with shoring up first party data. And then the third thing that I would say that is very practical is that advertisers do need to crack consent, need to get a better understanding of what consent looks like. And in order to do that, I would highly recommend that advertisers look into partnering with CMPs, which is consent management platforms. They are add-on to the website. A lot of them are very affordable. Some of them are free of charge. But what this piece of software does is that they capture, so there's the cookie banners, which people will argue, we don't want to do cookie banners, we don't want to have pop-ups and all that sort of stuff. That ship has sailed. With Bill 64, achieving royal assent. That's the Quebec privacy law, which ultimately puts the entire country into a situation where they're going to have to go opt-in anyways. So we're kind of staring down the barrel. So try to come to grips with the fact that we're going to be moving towards an opt-in. We don't want it, obviously, but we're going to have to get used to that notion or the idea. And so in order for you to get used to it, you need to start exploring the consent management platform solutions that are out there, and then start experimenting sooner than later on what the best practices are for your individual brand to capture consent. Right, and to have full trusting disclosures, and to work with these CMPs because they also provide platforms for A/B testing and to get a better understanding of how you can capture consented audiences. So I think that those three things: value, short term, obviously now trying to wrap your head around it. 2 is sustainable value and have a plan that's ongoing and create a budget for that with your agency. And then the third thing is invest in the time and energy into a consent management platform.
I couldn't agree more. I think honestly, it really is. I think that right now there is an opportunity for people to do this stuff and experiment before things change, and they need to get ahead of it. As you said, if they just wait for it to change, they've lost their opportunity and they've lost the window. I think investing into experimentation is going to be key. Knowing that these consent platforms are there now, and I would advise people to look at models like growth modeling. So nobody really likes the word hack, or some people do, some people don't. But in the end, there's a lot of material around growth hacking, or lean startup, or whatever you want to call it. But it's the process of experimenting with your customers to find out, what is actually valuable to them. I think if you take in, the process of, growth team modeling and agile thinking, and developing sprints and an actual growth team, and making this their core focus. Their core focus as the growth team is consent and understanding how to get it, tracking that with the models that are there, and actually investing into that process over the next 2 years, and cracking that and understanding what is it that I've got as a brand that I can bring to my customer value to actually get that consent while they have the opportunity to do so. I think makes a lot of sense. But there are processes to actually run these experimentations, and I think it's important for people to actually look at that and understand the templated models towards doing it. So I'll give you guys, the book by Sean Ellis, Hacking Growth, also Lean Startup. Those are really good reads, and those help actually model out how to create a really good process around experimentation. I would tell people to go down that road of figuring that part out and actually investing into setting that up. So great. Let's talk about fraud, because we can't talk about data without talking about fraud.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we know it's many times it's the elephant in the room. Anybody that knows programmatic knows it's there. Google has some pretty crazy numbers in terms of how much non-human traffic is out there. We see it in mobile and programmatic at scale. We have to constantly be monitoring, putting in tools, and literally on a monthly basis, just keeping an eye on it and even adding things against it. When these changes occur, is that going to give the fraudsters an ability to scale what it is that they're doing? Or could it work in the opposite direction as we start to think about things in a different way? I mean, I wonder if it could go either way. What do you think?
I think that we've come a long way, first of all, right? So, I think that the industry has been heads down working on solutions. Whether it was TAG, which was the Trustworthy Accountability Group that kind of was a spinoff of IAB in the U.S. a few years ago. They have now really made a big impact around the world. I think even just in generating awareness around the fact that we need to establish a safe supply chain, which means that we need to squeeze out the bad actors. So once you start looking at it from the perspective of squeezing out the bad actors, what does that mean, right? So it means things like, potentially blockchain solutions, right? It means handshakes. It means increasing mechanisms online that allow for transactions not to occur if they're not legitimate, right? And so I think that there's been some really elegant, in their simplicity, solutions that have come out from the industry. And Tech Lab a few years ago came out with, and I know you're familiar with it, many may not still be, but ads.txt. And
Right.
just such a very simple mechanism, which just allows webmasters, right? So like, insert any sort of .com domain. It allows them to establish who can resell their inventory. And it's kind of like a guest list when you're going to a nightclub, right? So if your name's not on the list, you don't even get in. You don't get the bid. You're cut out. You're basically cut out of the deal. And so I think increasingly, as we see adoption, it's making such a huge impact that I think the biggest challenge that we're going to see is that as we keep coming out with new solutions that are very easy to implement, it's going to be about adoption. Right. And it's also equally important to have the buy side put pressure on the supply chain to ensure that they're implementing these things, right? So you already saw Mark Pritchard in 2017 saying, okay, if you're not tag certified, we're not going to do business with you, right? So Mark Pritchard being, a CMO of Procter & Gamble, which made a huge impact, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, whether it's tag certified or just, an IAB sort of gold standard where you've implemented all of these mechanisms, many of them are free. I mean, use the tools that are available to you, and then we should talk about how much fraud actually still exists, right? I think that we're still kind of dealing with a situation where it's like, we're complaining about a situation where people haven't really implemented, they haven't put their seatbelt on. They haven't actually done the precautions to avoid the fraud, and they're still pointing at the fraud. And it's like, okay, it's so frustrating. Like, implement the stuff, and then let's talk in another year and see how bad the problem actually is now, right? So I think that we all need to generate awareness about the tools that are out there that exist to actually squeeze out the bad actors. And there is a lot of stuff, and it's still coming.
Yeah. We saw, over a period of 2 to 3 years, just in Canada alone, over 200 million devices that we basically counted as suspicious or fraudulent. And so and that's just in Canada. So, but they come and they go, right? So they'll pop up and they'll go away. But, I think the mobile measurement, so, you and I talked about this before, the difference between, web and app. And there's obviously a lot of similarities, but, in the app space, there's a number of different things that are done so differently. Attribution is done in a completely different manner, for example. And, that space, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think the mobile measurement partners have been doing quite a bit in terms of, setting up to understand fraud at a device level. So, understanding that these particular devices and actually having a list of devices that you can use to negatively target, understanding that those devices come from specific IPs, and those IPs are suspicious because they're producing all of these devices. Like, there's a number of things that are happening there, and so I think that that will lead to some opportunities. I think going back to like the first question, the discussion of CRMs. I heard a really good term from a data scientist that says bots don't buy. Very true, right? So, so if you're looking at an omni-channel perspective and trying to, attach, the even the past the lower funnel activity, backwards, and actually understanding the habits and behaviors from an actual purchase level perspective within a CRM, and using that to also identify, I think is good. And
I think
one thing.
like just to your point, like I think that verification systems, like third-party verification systems, are becoming more and more sophisticated.
Yes.
And I think that we're starting to get really, we're onto it. And to your point about, identifying these clusters of mobile devices that actually don't exist, right? Like,
Yeah.
that are, they pop up and then they scurry away like cockroaches, right? Like they're, those are like, even just the idea that you're able to identify those, that's a huge development. That's a huge opportunity for us to be able to eliminate fraud. The other part of it is the emerging startups. Like, there's a really cool Canadian homegrown startup, Contextful, that basically what they do is they're able to sort of look at the usage of the device, right? So that they can add another layer of verification on top of it, right? So it's like the ad was playing while the phone was, I don't know what they're using, gyro technology or whatever it is, to understand that a viewer, the phone was positioned in such a way that the user was definitely interacting with the device, right? So there's going to be all sorts of nuanced layers on top of verification systems that I think are going to speak to those issues that you've raised, right? It'd be really important for the brands. Now, the one thing that I will say, sort of, I know that we're getting to closing, but like the one thing that I do want to stress is that brands are going to have to start wrapping their heads around the fact that the market price of digital advertising across apps and across CTV, across every like web, is going to increase.
Yeah.
Because you're going to start seeing that it's correcting. The market needs to correct itself. There's no longer the $2 CPM trash that you were happy with before because it represented volume. So,
That's a great point. That's a great point. If you should actually be suspicious if you're running a campaign and you're seeing your clicks, your CPCs are too low, or your CPMs are too low. That's actually a flag to tell you that there could be either it's running on something that's like a pop-up or something of that nature, or it's fake, potentially. It's
value.
yeah. There's no question, and I think when you talk about the modeling and understanding at a high level, and going back to omnichannel, that allows you to stay away from just trying to buy based on tonnage, and just focusing on a CPM versus focusing on the sale and the path towards it. One thing that we haven't touched on, and I know we're almost running out of time. I think we have another 5 minutes or so. Is
I don't know whether we have 5 minutes. I think we have 1 minute.
Okay. Well, I'll just say it, geographical data. Right
Okay.
now, there's so much data at a geographical level. Canada has insane amounts of data at a postal code level. The US has an insane amount of data at a zip code level, and it's privacy compliant. That's another tool set to think about on understanding the microcosms at a geographical level. There are 850,000 postal codes in Canada, and there are tens of millions of data points that you can get on those postal codes. Understanding, that information could lead to a lot of things. We actually use that for even fraud when there's too much activity coming from one small area. So it helps you with that. It gives you some incredibly good, malleable data that you can use, and allows you to, even cross-section what you're doing with other forms of advertising, right? So
yeah, what I like about that is also the idea of being able to map out true and sort of unearthed competitive sets, right? So
yes.
Just understanding traffic patterns of your customer base, and understanding also just the lengths that they will go to get to you. That type of stuff, like even just those minor details, are just so valuable when it comes to planning as a brand strategist. But
especially when it comes down to things like e-commerce and online purchases, where you're not necessarily traveling to a retail location, and understanding where people live and work, which is going to be where a lot of the purchases are going to be happening, and how we can tie in activity down to that sort of micro geo level, and use that for the purpose of data science, and use that for the purpose of building long-term sustainable audience information that can be used across multiple. I mean, and that would be more than just digital. Right? It would be truly omni-channel, and allows you to do quite a bit.
Well, it's really great talking to you.
Fantastic. This has been great, Sonia. I have to apologize to the audience though, because we were going to allow for a question, but I don't know if we have enough time. Okay. Oh, is that it? Are we?
Yeah.
Where did we cut off? I don't even know. Oh.
Wait until you hear the music. No. Okay.
All right. I think this is this. I think this is a great way to end it. Sonia, thank you so much. Super insightful. Again, I'll encourage everybody to get to the IAB, website, and look at what Tech Labs is doing, and encourage you to look at some of these other, things that we've been talking about. I'll mention again, those books, Growth Hacking and Lean Startup, to talk about how to run experiments. Think about consent. Think about all these tool sets that you could be thinking about. Geographical information. What's your CRM plan? Do you have a CRM that can even integrate with these other platforms? And maybe you should be thinking about it if you don't. All these kind of key points, and what to focus on, and how to prepare, over the next couple of years, maybe a year even. I wish we had the exact answer on that, but because as you can see, it changes. But thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed it.
Have a great day.